All right. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. A very warm welcome from a very warm Glasgow, shockingly. Great to have you all here. Thank you to our panelists for being here. I'll introduce them in just a moment. Today, we're talking about soft skills, which is such an interesting topic, and I've not seen many conversations about this. So I'm really looking forward to jumping in and getting your perspectives on everything. Just so everyone knows that's watching, this is an interactive session. This is happening live. Anything could happen next. So please do use the Q&A function. You can find that at the bottom of your screen, and I will be moderating those questions. So as and when things come up, don't wait till the end. Just pop them in there and I'll either wait, or if it feels really relevant, I'll ask in the moment. So do use it. We have these people here live with us, which is awesome, and let's take advantage of it. So that's all from me. I'm Hazel Jane. I'm the host for today. Here with me, I have Delphine, Sara, Euan and Abel. Thank you again for being here. Just before we jump into soft skills, it would be great to just get an idea of who you are and where you're working. So Delphine, could we start with you?
Very briefly, my name is Delphine, I'm French. I am a former scientist and lab manager, and I started a career in data science 2 years ago with a lot of use of my former soft skills. So hopefully I'll be able to be useful.
Fab, thank you so much. And Sara?
I just started with the Data Lab, and I am the placement program coordinator for the past 8 years. Previously, I've been working with women in STEM and students to get them into STEM roles in Scotland. So a lot of soft skills, employability skills, and supporting students.
Amazing, thank you. Euan?
My name is Euan Vance. I lead the data engineering recruitment at NBN Solutions. I've been here for 2.5 years. I was a football coach my whole life up till then. So a wee bit of a change, but fully embraced it and really love the world of data now. So
I'm sure there's some football soft skills that we can dive into later.
Let's cross over.
And Abel, how about you?
Yeah, hi everyone. Can you all hear me? I hope so. My earphones just died on me. Anyway, these things happen, it's technology. Hi, I'm really glad to be here this afternoon. My name is Abel Aboh. I work for the Bank of England, where I lead the data management service across the entire bank. So I've been in data management space for close to a decade. It's really passionate about it. I'm an advocate for data management, all things data and technology. So really glad to be here today.
Amazing. Thank you so much for joining us. And just to jump in, I thought I would start with a kind of baseline question, which is, what are soft skills? Like, let's get a definition before we roll into everything else. So I'd love to know what you kind of think of when you think of soft skills, what your definition is, and what your biggest, strongest, whatever the word is, maybe we can talk about that later, what your best soft skill is. Sara, can I start with you?
Yeah, so soft skills, I think, are employability skills, or I kind of use those terms interchangeably. They're the core skills needed in almost every single job. I can't actually think of a job that you would not need them in. They're the foundation of your professional life, but I think that they're also applicable to your personal life. So communication is something that we use on a day-to-day basis. Networking skills, flexibility, adaptability, these are all things that are kind of used both professionally and personally. I think my strongest skill, and not one that I started off with, so this is something for those of you listening, you don't have to start off being really strong, and that skill is communication. I think when I was 18, I was a very shy, introverted student at university, and realized that I needed to be really good at communication because sadly, to be successful, you need to be able to talk to people. And so now I think it's actually my greatest strength. I'm really good at networking. I'm very good at public speaking, and I love actually chatting to new people. And so I think it's one of those things. I think also it's the skill that is the most interchangeable because you need it for pretty much all of the other softer employability skills.
Great, thank you. And I love that you didn't start with that. That's such a fantastic note for us to start on, that this is not, if you're born with it, you've got it, and then if you're not, good luck. It is something that can be learned. So thank you for bringing that up so early. Euan, can I come to you next?
Well, it's interesting. For me, soft skills, it's like everything's linked back to your mannerisms and personality traits, and everyone's going to be stronger at some things than others. And even though we talk about the ability to communicate with people, sometimes you find that the quieter people, when they do talk, deliver the most impact. And it's we've all got different ways of delivering things, but I mean, yeah, of course it's linked to employability, and I think naturally the one thing, and it's something that I've naturally been, you know, pretty decent with, growing from teenager into adult and stuff like that, is just natural rapport building. You know, the ability to just sit down and find common ground with someone. You wouldn't believe how useful it is to be able to start the first 2 minutes of a conversation well, and the rest of the conversation will go from there. So I'd say just looking inward at myself, that's something that makes my life a bit easier, I think.
Right, I love that, thanks you. I really hoped that you were going to be like, I'm so good at shouting at a team on a pitch, and that's just like really got me somewhere, but you didn't bite, so that's fine. Abel, how about you?
Yeah, I think for me, you know, I like what Euan said as well. It's just about, I think, you know, mannerism is quite important, right? That's a great word to say. People will never forget how you make them feel. And we all are humans, because we're social creatures. We tend to interact at that level, and communication is absolutely fundamental in terms of developing relationship, wherever that relationship is. But when I look at soft skills, I do struggle with the word soft skills, because that word, I know, is one of those words coined out from Harvard because people are just wanting to group things together. But necessary from an acumen perspective, for me, those are skills that you can use across multiple discipline, multiple profession, right? And in order to do that, you know, so that technical skills, right? But anything that is not technical skills then fall under the umbrella of, you know, of soft skills. So people can talk about things like mindset, culture. People can talk about things like leadership, attitude, come back to that mannerism as well. So, and behavior, you know, because we're humans, you know, all those things are fundamental in terms of our DNA and how we're made up as well. So background, exposures, and all those things as well. So when I think about soft skills, that's the way I would like to, but I don't like the word soft skills because it kind of leans to the to like, okay, what is our skills then? For me, those are really fundamental skills. So I just call them skills, but they're different skills, right? But also they're kind of different from technical skills.
Yeah. And what would you say your strongest?
I think there are a couple that really served me well. Communication is one, but I think just building relationship, interpersonal skills. I want to say something, kind of flip it around, just being vulnerable, right? Being vulnerable. There's something in psychology called the vulnerability loop. Being able to share to someone and someone can feel you at a human level, that I'm talking to a human, and they can interact with you as well. So those things have really, really been useful. I think once you can do some of those things over and over again, you just realize that majority of the people will mean well. They want to have a conversation. They want to get to know you. And then at the same time, you want to get to know them as well.
Great, I love that. And we will go back to what you said earlier about soft skills, because I have to agree that I don't love it as a name, and it's definitely like technical skills and then just anything else is over here. So we'll get into that a bit more. Maybe this is the panel where we rename it and we change the world. So just putting that pressure on you early on. Delphine, how about you? How do you define it, and what's your strongest soft skill?
I would say soft skills, quite in line with what Sara was saying earlier. It's a lot about your behavior with team, and all about yourself and how you communicate, how adaptable you are with other people, how you network with other people. And I think it's, for me, they're quite critical, because they're at the center of what helps you communicate as a team and work together as a team. And you can be like technically the best data scientist in the world if you don't have any soft skills or any skills to be able to communicate with people around you, then it's not going to be much use to be technically the best. The one that I'm the strongest at, and again, like Sara, is something that was absolutely terrible when I started my career. I would say is my adaptability. It's been all about learning how to communicate with others, how to best ask questions, how to best understand how they work, and how to best change the way I communicate with them so that they could learn better and I could learn better from them.
Mm-hmm. It's such an interesting thing, isn't it, that we get to adulthood and then we learn to ask a question well. Or, you know, I've been in my previous job, we did a whole day session on how to ask and give feedback. And you're like, I can't believe I'm a fully fledged adult human and I'm only just learning these like really basic fundamental soft skills of being able to communicate with my team properly. And something kind of going on from what you just said, Delphine, I've got a colleague that always tells the story that when I think it's the Navy SEALs or something, or really high up in the kind of military, they don't look for the highest performers, they look for the highest performers who have the highest trust from their team, because it doesn't matter how well you perform in terms of outcome if your team that you then lead doesn't trust you to make decisions. So it's not just about performance, it actually doesn't get you to where you need to be. It has to be, well, do people trust you and are they willing to be led by you? So I think it's just a fantastic point. So my next question, I think it's interesting that you had, both of you actually, Sarah and Delphine, you've both said that you kind of cultivated these skills later on. And maybe my question is a bit assumptive, saying that we're kind of born with it, but I'm interested for the people watching, what you would suggest to them in identifying their existing skills. How can people look at themselves and say, gosh, I think I'm quite good at that, or actually, even though I'm not good at that, I'd love to cultivate that. Where do we start when we're kind of assessing ourselves in that way? Abel, can I actually start with you on that one?
Yeah, sure. So I think, firstly, you know, there's no really ultimate advanced level in when we talk about non-technical skill, you know, aka soft skills, right? I mean, you can be as good as the great communicator ever. You run a TED show, and you know you're really sitting out there. The Barack Obama, I think I read Barack Obama, you know, biography as well. He was just talking about his training and just talking about how he grew, you know, and sometimes as well, just going back to his speech as well. So these are people that have got the support, the resources, great speech writers, and then they'll say, oh, I need to do this better, right? So there's no ultimate pinnacle in this. But the good news for everyone is that you can progress, you can develop, right? And I think that's the question there. So when we think about from a career perspective, you know, whatever destination look like, there's no destination in this, right? It's a lifelong thing. It's a lifelong learning. It's a lifelong skill that you need as a human being, right? And I suppose animals as well have the same as well. Just because, you know, the fact that we're not animals in terms of dogs and cats and all that, they do have theirs as well that they need to take all the way to their life. Now, for humans, for you to exist, you just make sure that obviously communication is important. Apparently, I'm told, right, and this is a fact, that whatever we're going to say here today, about 20 to 40% is what people will remember, right? And the 60% will just go off their head. It doesn't matter. Why? Because now, in order for you to get the 60%, you've got to hone just active listening skills, right? And that comes with investment, time, and energy and resources as well. So for me, it's not a destination, it's just a journey, right? It's just a journey. So the best people ever, whoever that you're looking at, that you think that, wow, this person, when the person opens his mouth, wow, this is amazing. Trust me, those people, when you go to them, they'll tell you that I'm just learning as well. I'm, you know, from one step to the other. It's almost like a mountain. You keep moving. I'm not going to use Ben Nevis or Mount Kilimanjaro or something, but there's no destination to it. It's just a journey. And I think it's very important for people to recognize that.
That's a really interesting point. And there's kind of something in there that these skills change. You know, actually the way that we communicate as humans changes. So it's not a question of you just get really good at it and then you're done and like it's a big tick next to your name. Actually, you know, the transition from real life onto most of us were on Slack or other online platforms. Actually, there's maybe a different soft skill in there of communicating online and making people feel included. So it's never just a one and done. There's a whole kind of, there's something really positive about that and a bit exhausting, I think, about that. But we're all up for the challenge, I hope. And Euan, how about you? What's your kind of perspective on where people can start to identify their skills and get moving with it?
It's interesting. It's something that, yeah, it's hard when you go to write down, maybe write a CV, or you write something down about yourself on a bit of paper. You're like, what am I good at? Like, who am I? And it's hard to nail things down, but naturally you will have things that you're more gifted at. And I think when we talk about soft skills, I mean, naturally the number one thing it always comes back to is communication skills. Like, that's probably the main, like, the thing that it comes back to, and maybe critical thinking, which is so important from a business context these days. But really, to do anything and advance yourself in any way, and this can be whether you want to be able to deadlift 200 kilos, or whether you want to get better and from a business environment, or get better at public speaking, is you need to get out your comfort zone a wee bit. If I look at, like, myself, when I was 13, I wanted to I realised I'm not going to be a football player. I'm average, but I've got loads in here that I want to pass on, I want to share. So I'm going to start coaching. Remember the first session, I stand up in front of 8-year-olds. You know, it's not that intimidating, but you're standing there shaking like Jesus. You forget half of what you're going to say. You know, you forget how the drill goes. The more often you put yourself out there and get out your comfort zone, the more you learn. Because I've always said the best way to learn is actually to teach, because you approach things from a more critical perspective. You think about things in more detail. And that's why I'm doing this today. I've never done anything like this, but I'm scribbling down notes as well about people, what you guys are saying. And obviously, I think anyone, if you want to, you know, develop yourself from a communications perspective, try and just change things in everyday life. Whether you're going for a coffee and you're asking for it, you get to the till, integrate a wee smile, be a wee bit more flamboyant with the way you say thank you or ask them about their day. Integrate that stuff, and then natural conversations are going to get easier every time you have them. And as well, from a critical thinking perspective, because you really need to, people are going to ask you difficult things. We all freeze. I'm probably going to do it today where you ask me something and I'll be like, yeah. But we always need to think about what we're going to do before we do it, or think about what we're going to say before we say it. That's something that changed my life when I was younger, is before someone's about to say something, or you're approaching someone on the street that you know, I've already run through half the conversation. I'm ready for anything. So that's literally a me thing. But if someone wants to kind of think about that and how they apply that on a daily basis, I think that makes a big difference.
Thanks, Euan. I really like that you mentioned CVs on there, because I think there's quite a lot of maybe younger people watching, or people at the very beginning of their career, and it's nice to hear someone that's in their career be, you know, I've sat down in front of my CV and just been like, really positive, hardworking, same nonsense that everyone else says. So it's just nice to like affirm that we're all kind of in the same boat there. And also, you know, big kudos for you for being here today. And I love hosting panels. I get so much joy from it. And the first time I did it, I was like shaking and my face was pale and I was dry. So, you know, even if you love something, it can still be a bit nerve-wracking. And I think that's also a point to remember, that you can love a soft skill, or something that a soft skill offers you, and still be nervous to do it, and that's okay. So thank you so much for bringing all of that up. And Delphine, can I come to you next?
Yeah, sure. I think identifying soft skills for me was more of a day-to-day experience, where I could see what I was good at and what I was terrible at. So especially when I was managing my own team, I had people coming to me to ask questions, how to get more organized, how to improve their project management skills, how to improve their communication skills, trying to explain what would make sense to someone and not to somebody else. And then what was a lot less good at and that I had to improve on. And yeah, communication is a big one, because, well, especially in data, starting a career in data, communication skills are not really just a background skills that you should have. They're quite key and core to your day-to-day job. So yeah, learning how to be able to communicate with different people. I remember I went to a management course, and they had a whole section about emotional intelligence. And for me, that was the big like light bulb moments where it's like, so different people learn differently, different people. In my head, I was like, well, if it's easier for me to learn this way, I always feel that for the rest for everybody, the same for everybody else. And yeah, so just learning what others' differences. What if somebody who comes from France says something in a certain way, it doesn't mean the same thing that if somebody from the UK says exactly the same thing, and just with little differences in communication skills. But as far as identifying them, it was, yeah, I would say a day-to-day thing. What did people naturally come to me for and ask me questions about, and what did I struggle a lot more and I had to do a bit more work to learn how to do.
Great, thank you. And Sarah, how about you in terms of starting that process? How do we identify?
So I think, because I work a lot with students, so you most of the time you don't actually identify until much later in your career. So I like Google is an amazing resource. Download a list of what are those transferable or those soft skills. And then I tell students in our exercises and employability courses to basically try to find an example in your professional life for each one of those. And that can be your academic life, because I think we also always think you have to have had a job to have soft skills, and that's not actually true. You could be a volunteer, it could be theoretical, it could be academic. So just make a list, compare it to your CV, try to have examples, and the ones that you struggle with are the ones that you need to kind of keep an eye on and start working on. But as your career progresses, those examples will get bigger, better, and bigger. And the nice thing about that is that kind of template will then serve you for interviews, because you're going to have a list of kind of some competencies that you're going to be able to bring up. So when you're talking about communication, you'll have examples that you've thought of already there. So I think that's one thing. And then I think the other thing is asking your network. Ask your best friend, ask your partner, ask your boss or your academic course leader, or family members. Moms and dads like to tell you you're amazing sometimes. In person, not so much. After the fact, probably yes. But ask them, like, what am I good at? And they'll probably tell you, because sometimes it's really hard to look in the mirror and be like, oh, I'm good at communication, or I'm good at flexibility or adaptability. But someone in your network will be like, hey, you do this really well. So ask them that, and then be open to feedback if some of it's not as positive as you're hoping. So I would say, yeah, write a list and then also ask your network.
Great, thank you. And I've got a kind of follow on to that, which is the language around soft skills. And again, we'll kind of get to the labeling of that later. You know, if I'm talking about my technical ability, I can say, look, I got an A in maths. Objectively, I'm good at maths, okay? Like the board looked at my paper and they said, this person's good at maths. What more do you want from me? But I think particularly people who are shy, or maybe that's not a great word, but people that have less confidence or haven't been in the workforce for very long, I think it can be very difficult to say, no, I'm really good at communication. It's like, okay, what proof? So Sarah, I'll come back to you first. What do you suggest to students? Okay, yes, say that you're good at communication. You mentioned already having examples of, times when you've used that skill, which is fantastic. Are there any language, or is there any words around that we can use to get more comfortable saying that we're good at something when we don't have the kind of tangible grade to prove it?
So I'm kind of against the measurement of soft skills, because I think it depends on what job you're in. It can depend what sector you're in, and then the metrics and how you kind of measure it changes. And so I don't really like the measurement of it. I think it really comes down to the communication of how good you are or not at that. I think there's something culturally. So I'm half Spanish, half from the US. And the Spanish European side is like, do not brag about it. Be humble. You don't want to be above, the top line. Don't say anything. And the US side is like, you're number one. Tell everybody, baby, like, winging your flag and the whole thing. So I think there's an element there. There is language that you can use. Again, Google is a great resource. A lot of recruitment companies, I will not mention any names, have a lot of great resources online of what is the language you should be using. What are those keywords? But I think if you are applying for a job, and Euan can tell me because he's an HR consultant, but recruiter, if I'm wrong, is look at the job description, because the job description basically is your guide to what language you should be using if you're trying to apply to a job, because they're using the keywords that they want to hear in the interview. So that should be present when you're talking about yourself and in your CV. But personally, I think it's about practice. I think it's like looking, I know it sounds a bit redonkulous, but look at yourself in the mirror and practice saying, I'm really good at communication. Because I think the thing about having those examples is it's evidenced. It's not you're just saying it because you're saying it. You have an example that evidences that you are good at communication. So I think that's one thing. But I would, again, say just go on Google because there's so many great resources there. And for the students, I know you don't want to hear this, but your careers advisors at university and college are a free, amazing resource. So do not underestimate what they can offer you because they're there to help you with scenarios like this one.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. And as you mentioned, Euan, this is your world, right? Is recruitment. So what language do you either look for, or do you encourage people when they're talking about their soft skills, and what does that look like from your perspective?
So it's interesting. It depends on what level like of job you're applying for as well. There's all sorts of different things that are going to apply here. But Sarah's right. I mean, looking at a job description and familiarising yourself with the opportunity that you're presenting yourself to, you need to know what you're talking about. Do your research. Like without a doubt, if you've not looked up the company, jumped on LinkedIn, and feel free to do a bit of snooping into who's the hiring manager. Maybe you're a data scientist. Let's go and see who their data scientists are. And that's how you're going to mentally prepare yourself to be able to talk to them comfortably. But in terms of identifying the actual skills, yeah, I don't like to label them either. To be honest, they're called soft skills because they can be delivered softly. I don't think going in, basically, paint the picture. People apply to roles, or I go and find people for roles that I think look good technically. I've got no idea what they're like from a personality or soft skill perspective, but I have a phone call with them. And we talk about their role, their history, what is it that you want to do from here going forward. I'm going to suss out their communication skills throughout that call. All right, I don't want you to say, I'm good at communication or I'm really bad. From that phone call, I should be able to suss that out. So you want to make sure that everyone you speak to from an employment perspective is, always bring your natural personality across. If you can almost project your smile through the phone as well and make the other person feel engaged, that's it. Because sometimes you do talk to people, and look, not everyone's like an extrovert or an introvert, but some people are naturally, find the conversation easier, which is absolutely fine. Just make sure that you're not just answering a question, for example. One of the big things from a communication perspective is that two-way street. Even if you feel like you're in an interview and just being questioned, feel free to pop them a wee question back, or feel free to expand a little bit more than you normally would. Rapport building is probably one of the biggest things, especially if we're looking at technology and data. You can really if you're not the best coder in the world, you can make yourself stand out massively by being a good communicator / leader. I think that on the first conversation with someone, project yourself in a way that's going to make yourself sound like someone you would like to talk to in the pub. That's genuinely the way I look at it. Be casually professional, if you want to coin it. Casually professional, because we've dumped the suits and the ties and everything now. Don't go into an interview or a situation, maybe talking with a CTO, where you think you've got to live up to something. All right, let's not go in trying to impress people and trying to make yourself seem like something you're not. Be yourself, relax, and be someone that you would like to go to the pub with.
Thanks so much for that. And I think it's really interesting. You've kind of hit like a core part of this conversation, right? Which is the soft skills will be displayed. Like you can't even, you can write all you want in your CV, but it's the things that people will recognize in any conversation before they've even seen your work. Those are the things that will come through. So I think that's such a fantastic point. And Delphine, if it's okay, I'll come to you next. And I'm interested because Sarah mentioned the kind of US versus UK perspective, and I'm interested in France. Is there a France UK, is there a big difference in the way that people present themselves?
Yeah, massive. Which it wasn't easy. It's never been easy for me here because I'm quite introverted and I'm quite I don't have like projection of personality thing, because I'm usually quite reserved and quite shy. In the communication side of thing, I'm always going to be the better listener and the better talker. But it's all, measuring soft skill is not it's about practicing, I would say. It's about find something that, as Euan was saying earlier, it's just put yourself outside your comfort zone, what you know you need to work on, just practice, and you'll get better at it. I still have to work on my presentation skills because it still makes me awfully nervous and awfully uncomfortable. But when you know there is somewhere that you need to improve, practice, and you'll get better at it. It'll get easier, it'll get more natural as well. I'm always a big it's good to try to be what you think people want to see you as, but at the same time just keep your personality, because what you're naturally doing and what the way you naturally communicate with people is ultimately what you're going to be good at doing and what's going to make you good at your job. So there's always a workaround where you don't always have to be really extroverted and really loud. You always can find a workaround to make it work for you.
Can I really quickly just jump in? I think that's important, because when we talk about diversity, we're not only talking about ethnicity and gender and nationalities, but also about perspectives and strengths. And so if you have certain skills that you're really good at, there will be other people in your team that balance that out. So I think that's also something that's I think is really interesting and desirable, is that you don't have to fit one mold to be successful.
Yeah, and take it from an extrovert. You don't want 10 of us on one team. You just absolutely, nothing could be worse than 10 people who are all happy to talk for ages and ages and ages and chat, you know. So I suppose that's a nice point as well to people that are watching. Don't go in thinking, unless I'm an extrovert, they simply don't want me, because people need teams that balance out. They need to know that they've got people that can work well together, and it's not just everyone vying for the same attention. So it's a great point. Thank you. And
sorry, Hazel, I was just going to say that point is massive, because that's something that I'm critical of myself at, is saying not so much in too many words. Like, if you're going to a job interview, or if you're going to join a high performing data team, they're looking for someone that can get the point across without bumbling and without dressing it up, and that the person that can sit there and observe and then basically come out with the answer. You don't need to be sitting there talking and leading for half an hour. Just take stuff in, and come out with a concise answer. That's one of the biggest things. You don't always need to be like the talker and whatever, because I know we're all quite comfy with that, but it's not the number one thing at all.
Yeah. Abel, anything to add on this in terms of?
Yeah, I was just reflecting what you and obviously Delphine and Sarah said. I think for me, one of the key words that came is authenticity. That word is really powerful. It just being yourself, that's what it means. What you see in the team is what's in the team. If it's solid, liquid, that's what is in the team. Being authentic, I think there's absolutely space for everyone to be authentic. Don't be afraid of being authentic. I mean, it will serve you well, much more than any other thing else. But other thing I want to just talk about quickly is about, when we talk about communication, obviously as part of soft skills, that's what we're talking. There are multiple soft skills, however, from stakeholder engagement, interpersonal relationship. But the beauty about communication is that it underpins everything. So when we talk about communication, one of the key things I would tell to people, think about the different channels of communication. You talked about Slack, right? That's one channel of communication. There are different channels of communication. You need to know them, and then you need to know what is acceptable in each of the channels of communication. One of the things that we talk about today is how people behave on social media, which vis-a-vis they don't behave like that in face-to-face as well. So because of in platform, people behave in a totally different way, and what is normal and what is not normal as well, what is acceptable, what is not acceptable. So understanding the channel of communication is really fundamental to help you improve on how you behave and how you communicate effectively. I think communication is about effective communication, and what that means is that it's about the audience. It's not about you. It's not about what you're saying. It's about the audience receiving it and confirming and concurring that they've understood you clearly of everything that you've said. That's what effective communication is about. You can't put an A to it. You can't put a B. It's not empirical. It's just about confirmation vis-a-vis the audience. And I think another thing, again, is around understanding what I call the 7 C's of communication. So things like concise, Euan talk about that, be correct, make sure that what you're saying is correct, make sure that you're concrete, make sure that obviously, you know, you're I mean, that part of the C's as well, correct, concise, complete, and all that as well. So check them, the 7 C's of communication. What that would help you to do is that would help you define a sentence or how you say something in a way that people can really understand you fully on what you say, you know. And if you want to say a fact, you make sure that you state the fact, backing it with the source, right? And these things matters because when you say it, then people like, oh, I understood correctly. Or you got that from Google and it was BBC and it was today, right? It's not BBC 5 years ago. It's BBC yesterday's news, BBC today's news. You know, so you're correct. You're giving factual information. And once you can try and get into all this thing, I talk about the platforms, the channels. I talk about obviously the 7 C's. And I think another thing people need to recognize, which is really fundamental, is 90% of communication is non-verbal. 10% is verbal. The things that you say, as important as it is are just around 10%. Your non-verbal communication is what really matters. That's where your gravitas comes in. That's where you know, there's an amazing book from Siva, talk about executive presence. I'll encourage people to read the book as well. You know, if you want to be a leader in an organization, that's the way you position yourself, your gravitas, the way you come across, your authenticity, how you position, how you make friends, what you do. Those things matters as well. But those things are not what you say. Those things are not what you say. So it's very, very important as well. So verbal and non-verbal communication is what I would encourage people to obviously explore.
I love that. Thank you. And I feel like what I'm hearing from all of you, if I was trying to sum it up, is being authentic within a context. So knowing who you are and knowing that it's okay that you don't have to be this big extrovert and be a certain way, but understanding, okay, you know, what's the cultural context, what's this workplace, how are people communicating with each other, and how am I going to fit well into that? What's the best way that I can fit into that? And I think that's a really nice kind of way of viewing it, that you don't have to be all things at once, but just knowing where you're going and knowing what space you're existing in, and then having a feel for who you are, and how that kind of works. And I think that would probably be a fantastic thing to bring into an interview as well, to say, I did a bit of research on what your organization looks like, and this is who I am, and this is how I think I fit. And then you're not having to fake anything, you're not having to pretend to be, you know, I have all of these many soft skills and all of these different ways. You can just kind of say, I already identified it, and explain it in hopefully a way that makes lots of sense to them. I'm aware of time. We've only got 20 minutes left, which is crazy. This is a nice question actually from Callum. I'm going to go back to the title of soft skills after this, because I think it's such an interesting one. But Callum has asked, have the use of soft skills changed in the last couple of years when non-verbal communication has been less effective via Zoom and Teams and things like that? So that's a nice, you know, I see you all, I have some cues from you in terms of what you're thinking, and I can sometimes see you smiling, but it's true that I don't get a feel for your body language. I can't tell if you're stressed. How does that feel for you? And actually, if anyone wants to jump in, or just pop your hand up. Yeah, Abel.
I will say this, all the research that just came out last couple of months have said that, you know, based on the pandemic, you know, it has accelerated as well. I mean, the need to soft skills are really amplified. You know, people talk about how you behave in hybrid meetings. You know, that's people have started putting out guides as well to their workforce and how people should behave. You know, getting people to use verbal notes, things like if you're in Teams, raising your hands and all that. There are also protocols that you need to familiarize yourself with using technology, and that's the beauty about it. So for me, you know, the non-verbal part can be explored using technology as well, absolutely. But one thing I would want to say that that's really amplified a lot, because right now, you know, you almost have to do a bit more. So it's not really hanging out with someone at the cooler or at the tea or having the, you know, smoke outside and having this conversation. You need to develop relationship quicker now. And not because you're doing it over Zoom means that you've got to do it for the next 12 months. No, there's no time for that. So now you've got to think about, what are the techniques I need to use, right, in order to help me get to the same destination, which is about building rapport with people, right? And using technology to do that. So you can do that, but when I want to say that the last 24 months has really accelerated that, right? Because people now working in hybrid, you can't really get everyone in a room. It's so impossible these days. So you got people in the room, some people are in their homes, some people are in Alicante at the beach as well, but they want to be part of the call. So you've got to get them all involved as well. So you've got to try as much as possible to use those techniques and those two technology in order to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're a case in point. Some of us are tuning in from home, some of us are in the office right now. So it's, you know, it's very much the world as we know it, and we have to kind of adapt to that. Euan, did you have something to say on this?
I was going to say you can always count on Callum to throw in a difficult question. It's interesting because it's not just the introduction of Zoom and Teams since COVID started, which has obviously meant a reliance on digital communication. It's been happening for years, just with the introduction of more advanced technology. We're all communicating with each other more and more digitally than in real life. You know, when I was growing up, you would say hi when you're walking by someone in the street. Now everyone's looking at the floor. You know, it's simple things like that. So has the use of soft skills changed? Probably. Chances are you can have more of an impact now when meeting someone in person than you used to. I would say that's quite a big thing. Like meeting someone, you know, finding out they're not as tall as you thought they were on camera and all that kind of stuff. That is so much more impactful now. But at the same time, I think you're right, digital communication, and the way that I see digital communication sometimes now is sales pitches and, you know, trying to get a new client on board, for example. Abel, Bank of England, if I called him up, I don't know whether he's a guy that really likes a conversation and I can, you know, talk about data engineering and find a level with him, or if he wants me to cut the BS and get to the point. You know, that's where I think like the world is transitioning back to in person. And I think everyone should be prepared to utilize that as much as possible, because it's going to be very powerful over the next couple of years.
Mm-hmm. Love that. Thank you. Sarah, Delphine, anything to add to that?
I think it has changed, but at the same time, I think we've had to use those soft skills even more, because for a lot of small organizations, you had to go online really quickly. And so you had to problem solve, you had to be critically thinking, you had to learn how to communicate and figure out where your camera was, because most of us didn't do our day-to-day lives on Zoom. So I think, and the teamwork aspect of learning how to, like, I onboarded in the day lab online, and that's not the same as Abel was saying, having a cup of coffee and talking to someone. So I think some of the communications are not as impactful, but I think it's forced us to think outside the box and work more closely. I probably have more meetings than I did face-to-face, sadly. And I don't know if they're as effective, but I think that we've had to use those soft skills in ways that we didn't think were possible. So I think they have been used, just not in the same context that we would have pre-COVID, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Delphine?
Well, what I was going to say was quite in line with what Sarah just said, just being more creative. And now when you have a meeting, it's not unusual for me to just be doing something else at the same time, and I need to finish that bit of code and just listen with one ear. So in order to have people actually listening to what you've got to say, you really have to think outside the box. But at the same time, to be more effective, to still work well as a team, I think people have spent a lot more time trying to understand how they worked well together and what they needed to work well. So how different people learn, how much pairing session can you do in a day, how much personal development time you need to be able to progress. And there's been, I think that in between teams, there's been a lot more work done to understand how people work well together.
Mm-hmm. It seems like the thing, you know, all the soft skills that we needed were maybe not quite the soft skills that we need now, or maybe they're the same, but we're using them a bit differently, and we're still figuring out, you know, I've seen people teams that, you know, the people basically responsible for happiness and the well-being and people working well together, having to basically go back to zero and say, okay, what does this look like? How do people work together? How do we measure that they're at least, you know, successful and that they're happy working together. So there's kind of confusion, but kind of as Sarah said, there's lots of room for creativity, right? We're doing things that we had never really dreamed of doing in this way, and there's something kind of exciting about that. So the big question, and someone actually asked this in the Q&A as well, and has some great starting words. So David said, do the panel not think the labeling of these skills are important? I've come across these kind of skills being labeled as core skills, essential skills, key skills, functional skills, meta skills, soft skills. What do we like? What do we hate? Is there another choice that just has it all? Anyone want to jump in?
This is a loaded question though, Hazel, because like you're going to say something and then the other panels are like, no, I disagree with you.
Yeah,
so it's kind of like, I'm going to give you my idea, but I know you're going to tell me it's wrong.
That's the magic of a panel, Sarah, is we want to see fighting. We want it to, you know, this is what people pay nothing for, or something for. So is there a word that you're just like, that one, I just feel good about that? And maybe it's one of the ones in that list.
My three favorite, if I had to use them interchangeably, and I'm going to give three because someone's going to tell me that I'm wrong on one of them, so at least I have an out. I would say transferable, because that is exactly what they are. They're transferable. I would say employability, because that's also what they are. They're what's going to help you get employed. And then I would say core, because it isn't just your professional skill set, it's also personal. So that's my diplomatic way of getting out of giving one answer.
I think that's great. And actually, I personally, I love core in comparison to soft. Soft is really that like, oh, it's so sweet, like a lovely little cuddly skill that you have, like awesome. But core is like, this is core to who we are. This is core to being a human being. So I certainly don't disagree with anything that you just said, but I would love it if another panelist did and wanted to jump in. Or are you all feeling the same way on that?
No, for me, sorry, and if you don't mind.
Carry on.
For me, there's a McKinsey report that talk about that the need, obviously, for about, I think the report, the survey that they carried out, they talked about 86% of the workforce across the world globally would have to reskill themselves, right? And reskilling themselves is important. And when we talk about reskilling, we're talking about skills. So one of these things for me, I could drop the first word and just skills are skills, right? I don't care about if it's called essential, desirable, all that are just words that people just use to describe what that word is, skill, acumen, what it is, you know. Aristotle did say something really fundamental. He used the three key things: ethos, pathos, and logos. Ethos is your acumen, you know. Pathos is your emotional connections. Logos is about your problem solving and reasoning and logics. You know, so that's the way they used to describe what people would look like and how people can, as someone that's a professional. So for me, a skill is a skill. But however, one thing I want to say to people is that because we have to reskill, right? 86% of the workforce globally have to reskill. I think what they've done is that they've said that within a week to 3 months, right? The reason they say something is soft skill is that within a week to 3 months, you can actually get the fundamentals of that skill, right? Technical skills are quite difficult because you have to then do possibly 12 months and above, 6 months and above to get a technical skill. So within, like, let's say day one, so it could be photography, right? It could be technical, it could be soft as well, but you can know the fundamentals, right, within a month to 3 months and start using those things, you know, on your day-to-day life as well. And when we talk about work, what's work? Work is beyond, you know, the separation between what I do for Bank of England and what I do at home. That barrier is broken. Now it's pretty much interchange. You know, it's all part of my identity as well. So this thing called work is, for me, is what we do in our waking time. And what I do with my waking time, I do that at the Bank of England, and I talk to family members somewhere else, and I do resolve some issues somewhere else as well. And I'm still working, right? So work itself has changed in terms of notion. So for me, I would just say skill rather than essential, core, functional, whatever that is. It's a skill, right? But they're quite fundamental because they do help us.
I really love that. And actually, you've kind of answered another question that was in the chat earlier, which was, can people, you know, is it possible to learn this skill? Like, are there skills that you don't have any chance of learning if it's just not coming naturally to you? But it kind of sounds like you think that these are all learnable, you know, and you can take the time, you know, if you want to get going with a soft skill, and actually it could be an easier kind of thing to bring into your life than maybe we thought. Euan, what were you going to say?
I was just going to say, I don't have that much of an issue with the actual term soft skills. I think, you know, we can coin things whatever we want. It's more about what it actually means than, you know, what the terminology is. But we just need to make sure that, you know, even I've done it today and we've done it a bit, is we're dressing things up with a couple of good points with a lot of fluff. But the main thing is being honest. Like, and let's, you know, I spoke to David Hiddleston, who was in the chat earlier on. And I think that was one thing, that was a couple of months ago, and he was kind of laughing and just going like, you're really, really honest. And I was basically, we were talking about different things to do with, you know, the university structure and feeding, you know, data candidates into industry and stuff like that. I'm always going to give honest opinions. And so one thing I'm going to say to everyone who, if you're a student or you're going to start applying for roles, is never be a yes, you know, what's coined as a yes man. Like, never just be that person who's trying to satisfy everyone. You know, you need to have your own opinions, your own views, and that's what critical thinking does, is it allows you to form an argument. And you know, if you're in work or interviewing for something, and you know they are talking about something that you don't necessarily agree with, have the minerals to talk about that, not in a brash, you know, arrogant way, but in a way that brings up maybe a new point. I just think soft skills, yes, but it comes back to your trait, your personality traits, because you're going to be better at some things than others. If you're not confident and you're thinking, oh, I don't know what I'm good at, or I'm absolutely rubbish at this, just think, you know, someone, for example, that's physically got an impairment, maybe they're blind, you know, their hearing and their feeling of touch is so much more powerful than everyone else's because of that impairment, and you've got that as well. So everybody is watching, take a bit of confidence in yourself and just be very honest. There's no point in trying to satisfy people. If you don't get on with someone, you don't get on with them. But
thank you so much for that. Abel, should we jump back to you quickly?
Yeah, sure. Just to respond to what Euan has said, basically, I think for me, authenticity means different thing in different culture. You know, we live in the 21st century Scotland, which is totally different from the 17th, 18th century. And background, I do know matters. You know, most of those things that we learn it from two perspectives. One, in terms of things that people pass down to us, in terms of behaviors people have demonstrated in front of us, or some of the things that we learn in classrooms. And I know that the curriculum in schools, in Scottish schools, is totally different from the one down south as well. So there are key things, but then think about people that have come from other part of the country, other part of the world as well, right? So I think for me, authenticity means different things to different people. But when you say to people, be yourself, everyone will understand what that means for them, you know, and then they will find that call and be themselves as well. So for me, when I think about that, so the point you made about, you know, just being honest, honesty comes as a result of you have to operate in a psychological safety environment where people value honesty. If you are in an environment where people don't value honesty and you're honest, you'll be out of the door. You won't pay your mortgage, right? And you need to understand that. And so people tend to, honesty means different things to different people as regards the space they're operating from. But I think more importantly, what I'll say to people, for young people, especially in your career, is that what, you know, when Aristotle talk about ethos, you know, acumen, it comes over time, right? Because you experience things, and they say experience is the greatest teacher. So the more you experience things, the more you start understanding what you're good at and what you like and why you like it, and the reasons for that as well. Because you might find yourself in a different situation and you think you like that thing, but actually you don't, right? Because we're evolving as social creatures as well. So that's the point I really want to make, because you've got to understand the context. And different organization operates as a culture, that organizational culture. And that's not a word that just a bypass word, is a word that is, those are the choices of those organizations people have made. And so we want this thing to be what we want to value, right? I work in the Bank of England. It's older than America. If you think America is complex, come to the Bank of England. Before America was formed, the bank has even been in existence. So, but the culture is totally different, right? To private sectors and other places as well. So you can't take that into the bank because you're going to fail woefully. So it's important for people to understand the culture you're operating in, what is acceptable, what is the norm, and what is not the norm, and how you can navigate those things. And that's where the acumen comes in. You know, that's when the critical thinking comes in. That's when developing the right relationship comes in as well. I just really want to make this point for young people trying to build their career, because I guess the topic is about career development, you know, so if you want to develop your career, you need to be conscious of those things as well.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. Delphine, I really want to come to you before we finish. Do you like soft skills? Do you like core skills? Do you hate all the words? How are you feeling?
I very much agree with you, and it doesn't really matter what they're called, especially if you want to start a career in data, problem solving and communication. They're something you have to have. They can be, you can call them soft, key, critical. It's something that any employer is going to want you to show, so that you can communicate effectively to people you're presenting your data to, and you can solve problems, because ultimately that's what we do. So yeah, I think it doesn't really matter what they're called. To go back to what was said earlier as well, about being authentic and about being true to your personality. Communication is, this is talking and there's a listening. So if you're excellent at listening to people, obviously you're never going to be the person that talks the most either. So be true to yourself, and own the skills that you're good at, and show that you're good at them. The rest of it can be worked on, but it's important to just embrace the ones that you really have.
Thank you so much. We're pretty much at time. I'm sorry that we didn't get to all the questions. There's quite a few in there about, how do we show on a CV, before we even get to the interview, before, we have the opportunity to display those skills. The only thing, that I would maybe just throw out just before we finish is, everyone here, but we'll get the recording for this. If I really wanted to apply for another job and I said, I think I'm pretty good at communicating, here's a panel I hosted. I don't know if they'll sit down for the full hour, but you can start to show that you've done things, or that you've done a project. If you are a good listener, you could do a journalism project. There are ways of displaying this without just saying I'm a good listener, or I'm a good talker, or I'm a good this or that. Does anyone have any last just nuggets of wisdom that they want to drop just before we finish up at 4? Don't feel really pressured into that, but it was just if there was something on the tip of your tongue.
I would say for CV advice, use active verbs, use keywords as well. It doesn't, because sometimes you have to go through filtering as well, right? Look at the JD, the job description, the job certification, and try and pick up the things that they're looking for. Every hiring manager is looking for something. And then that's the reason why they want to try and reflect that in job description or job spec as well. So try as much as possible to reflect that if you can.
Perfect. That's a great note to end on. Thank you so much for joining us. Thanks for the incredible panel. Thanks for all of you watching on a sunny afternoon. Really appreciate you being here. I know that it's been recorded, and so it will be available for the community later. If you want to get in touch with us, I'm sure there will be some options for that. But thank you again, and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Goodbye, panel.